I'm really excited to be giving this talk. I've got myself, I've got Alex. We're here representing Trace Labs. We're going to be talking to you all about the benefits of non-theoretical OSINT training and some of the drawbacks as well. But before we get started, who even are we? Alex, who are you?
So I'm Alex Minster. I'm an information security professional. I say that I've been doing information security for 15 years and then I stopped counting. I've been in a lot of different industries and started, a few years back, just giving things back to the community with knowledge and participation in Trace Labs.
Nice. How'd you get started in OSINT specifically?
I think how I got started in OSINT was really just using it for, finding information, doing research on threat actors. Really leveled it up when I just had some, personal projects that benefited from OSINT, and then getting involved with Trace Labs was putting those same principles of being good at finding information and finding things into play for benefiting missing persons.
Awesome. Now you ask me who I am.
Yeah, Tom. So, Tom, go ahead and tell me who you are.
Oh, thank you for asking, Alex. Tom Hocker. Day job, I'm a senior security engineer for a large grocery retailer in the United States. I play mostly in threat intelligence, OSINT, fraud, email phishing. Yeah, I mean, just pretty normal security engineer stuff, I think. Um, but I've only been doing that for less than 2 years.
What were you
The
doing
bulk.
before that, Tom?
Oh, thank you for asking, Alex. You're just full of questions. Um, the bulk of my, I guess, infosec and specifically like OSINT experience is actually Trace Labs and other like volunteer organizations. So I joke that I've been doing this for free way longer than I've been getting paid to do it. Um, but I found Trace Labs at DEF CON in 2019, and I found OSINT because of social engineering. And as it turns out, I'm way better at OSINT than I am at social engineering. So here we are giving this talk to you all today.
Although you could just be social engineering your humility.
This could all be like a 6 year long engagement. Like that's it.
Exactly, exactly.
Just playing the long game on this one.
Yeah, what is a Trace Lab? So that is a good question. So Trace Labs is a not-for-profit organization of what we call convergent volunteers. So just volunteers that all kind of come out of the woodwork and do this open source intelligence in order to help law enforcement find missing persons. And so it's really just kind of that multi-stage thing of identifying that problem of missing persons, identifying law enforcement that we can help with, identifying what the intelligence is that we need to provide. How do we gather that through all of our convergent volunteers, and then it just works backwards that way.
Yeah. And I think what makes Trace Labs unique, since I mean, it was my sort of entry into the field, is it's an amazing community of volunteers from all around the world coming together to hack for good, OSINT for good, to learn from each other, to support each other. It's incredibly beginner friendly. I joke that we're the gateway into the the larger OSINT community. People can come into our Discord, come into our community, come into our CTFs, learn, grow, share. It's just an awesome place to be, and I'm just super thrilled to be able to share like what makes us unique, um, with this audience.
Yeah, I think that's also it's beginner friendly, but it's also very uh, diverse in approachability, because people ask like, oh, are you guys just a collective of a bunch of hackers? Which, in the broad sense of the term, yes, we are all hackers, but we're not like computer geniuses. We're not information security professionals. That doesn't make up all of us. Some of them are like Tom from HR over here. You were an HR professional helping out. We have some excellent research librarians. We have people from all sorts of walks of life that help out, that may not be in any sort of IT role.
All right, Alex, that sounds really cool, but like, how exactly does Trace Labs do non-theoretical OSINT training? Like, what is a search party CTF?
Yeah, so a search party CTF is where we have real missing persons. These are cases that have been brought to us by the community where there is an active, law enforcement request for public assistance. We select those cases, good cases that we think would have that digital footprint, and then we have that distinct outline of flags and pieces of intelligence that we're looking for. We have the oversight of coaches that will help vet the intelligence that's set up, and in our CTF platform, we have where the teams and the contestants can submit those pieces of intelligence, again, non-theoretical on the cases. So like real information from real Facebook pages or really any corner of the internet or dark web that they find that information, and we have that in a very structured environment to get those pieces of information that then get parsed, and that resulting intelligence does get passed to law enforcement.
Got it. So teams of contestants are taking real missing persons cases, going out on the internet to collect very specific pieces of information, submitting that into the CTF platform, where it's then vetted by real human beings in real time. And then accepted submissions get points. Not accepted submissions get flipped back and say, hey, here's why I didn't agree with your submission. So it's a very, very realistic like experience, like as compared to a real world investigation. We have some very, very clear guidelines in place to do it safely. We'll
Yep.
touch on that a bit later in the talk. But it is a really, really cool experience. It's timed. Typically, our events are 4 hours long, so there is that constant ticking clock to your investigation. Which, while
Yeah, and
most real world investigations take more than 4 hours, there is still a deadline to the thing you're looking into as a professional investigator.
and then also for the CTS, just transitioning to kind of our overall theme, our capture the flag events, like we say they are the non-theoretical capture the flag, because the item that we're addressing, and we've gamified the system in order to really just be a vehicle for gathering intelligence. But the CTF is around gathering intelligence for missing persons, that we can find those pieces of intelligence, assign certain values for them, have that tracking of everything that comes in, just this wide bandwidth of information that we can then get people motivated to gather, and then we can just parse that and deliver that to law enforcement.
Yeah, and you hit on something that I think is really important, because we included it in the title of the talk, non-theoretical and theoretical training. So I think we can all agree that a great way to learn any skill is to do it. So you have
Absolutely.
to practice a thing to get better at it. Um, Traditional like infosec training is what I consider to be theoretical. And what I mean by that is if you're doing a hack the box, like someone has set up an environment with a set of vulnerabilities built in that you as the player are supposed to exploit. There's always an answer. The flag is in there somewhere. You just have to understand which of your skills to apply to this situation to get the desired result. Um, Alex, what's non-theoretical training? Like, what's the difference?
So the non-theoretical training is when you just have these, real world examples to where you're finding something that's out there in a bit of a practical area, but also with it being non-theoretical, you're dealing with like real information, real setup. In our instance, we're dealing with like real missing persons, and some of the trade-offs or the comparisons to where you have your standard training like the hack the box, where you say there's always a flag there, there's always an answer there. A lot of times with this non-theoretical missing persons, there's not an answer. You're not going to necessarily find all the information on the missing person. I think comparatively, you would have the non-theoretical training of doing an actual pen test on a client if you're contracted to. You're going to likely find something, but you might not find everything. You may not find that flag that sits in the CEO's email box. Like you may not actually get into uh, those areas. So as a non-theoretical, I think you just need to be prepared for not finding the answer that you were set out to find initially.
Yeah, that was probably like my biggest like WTF moment. Um, when I was working with Tracelab CTFs, like there weren't always answers. Like, we've gamified the intelligence collection process, so there are quote unquote flags, but not every case that we're working is going to have all those flags. Sometimes the answer is there is no answer. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really valuable lesson for people picking up OSINT for the first time, or even just learning how to structure an investigation. I think that's an important skill to learn. What do you think are some of the pros of theoretical training? Like, what are
So
the
some of the
good things come out of
Yeah,
that?
some of the pros of theoretical training is that it does give you that ability to know what to look for, to have things that are identified because they are present. So if we did set up, and there are a lot of others that set up incredible OSINT training to where there is a distinct answer, you're going to find that solution. You're going to find, if they say, "Hey, what's the date of birth of this person?" or "Hey, where did they go to high school?" You're going to find that answer. So the theoretical training helps in refining that tradecraft for like these are the steps that you should take to get to the known result. Same with like the hack the box pen testing labs is they have a question and they're setting you up to find that answer that you will eventually find it and you're going to learn that tradecraft for it.
Yeah, I think that theoretical training is an amazing way to reinforce pieces of learning. It's a
Yeah,
great way to set up, like, okay, we talked about SQL injections, now go do one.
yeah,
Or in like theoretical OSINT training, it's, hey, where is this picture taken? And then the person that set the challenge up already knows the answer. They've confirmed there is an answer, or answer this question about a company. But it's the guarantee of an answer that you know does add some structure and kind of gives you, as an investigator or a contestant, it gives you like a path to follow. Like, okay, it's a picture. I know it's a geolocation challenge. Here are the steps I do to geolocate a photo. Um,
yeah, and it is a very safe environment for anything that's potentially hazardous because again for like hacking techniques, pen testing techniques, you can't really learn how to do even like an nmap scan or SQL injection on a live site and go, I've never really done one before, can I do this against your live site? Most everybody's going to say no. So you have that safe environment for you don't really know how to do this yet. And we'll touch on that a little bit for like why do we then have newcomers that are able to do open source intelligence with us when they benefit from practicing in a theoretical environment first.
yeah. Just to wrap up theoretical training though, like what are some of the downsides in your mind? Like what are the cons of a pre-made, piece of training with the definite answer?
Yeah, I think that the downsides is it doesn't necessarily teach you how to pivot and how to revisit those initial questions and say, what is the question I'm trying to answer? You go, the question I'm trying to answer is to find this piece of information that I know is there, versus in like a non-theoretical, you have that benefit of, okay, that piece of information isn't there, but I found something else and I just have to pivot through, um, and you finding revisiting your question and going, is there a different question that I can answer?
Yeah, I think that for me the biggest downside of like a set up training exercise is that I tend to cheat. Um and like try to get inside the head of the person that created it, or hey, I know this is just a pretend contest question, so thinking through it, like just thinking through the game of that question can kind of get you to the answer in a way that the creator didn't intend.
Yeah, and
And
I
if you like lean on that crutch too much, like during the training, it's going to be kind of a shock when you get out there doing the real thing. And it's like, oh man, like, how do I figure this out now? How do I put all the pieces together, I guess?
yeah, and an advantage disadvantage for, again, the theoretical training is that there aren't any real penalties for trying something that fails. So if you say, hey, I'm going to, hack the box, you sit there and go, hey, I'm going to throw this tool against it, throw this scanner against it, or throw this exploit against it and try and see if it works. If it doesn't, well, you're not necessarily breaking anything, or at worst, you just have to like revert the box. Um, in a non-theoretical, you don't want to try things that are going to fail catastrophically. Like you can try and fail, but you have more boundaries in place for trying unsafe techniques, and that definitely comes into play with the OSINT search parties that we do.
Absolutely. And for me, the biggest benefit of non-theoretical OSINT training is it does force you to put all those pieces together. I like that you hit on, the consequences of failure. The great part is it's still training. There's
Yeah,
still a safety net. But the experience is much closer to a real world investigation than a sort of pre-made answer these list of questions that definitely have answers. So it's going to look a lot more like a real investigation, and I can speak to that as someone that did trace labs for years and now does this professionally. It was a pretty smooth glide path from trace labs to my threat intelligence job. So
yeah, and you find that non-theoretical, you are much more deliberate with your actions. In that, like you think through and make those kind of calculated actions for what you are going to do next. And again, that extends to our OSINT thing. That extends to like pen testing, to any sort of non-theoretical. Even if you're on the defensive side of the field, you want to be very deliberate in any changes, defensive measures that you make, instead of going, hey, I don't know, we're gonna try this. Like, let's just turn these things off in the firewall and see what happens. You can't necessarily do that. You have to be very deliberate in your actions, versus the theoretical. Yeah, you can get away with trying some things, and if it doesn't work, no harm, no foul. When in non-theoretical, there can be harm and can be foul.
yeah, let's dig into that. Like, what are the downsides? Like, there's obviously a trade-off. What are the downsides of a non-theoretical training exercise, like how we do it?
Yeah, the downsides of non-theoretical training exercises is that, like, the way we do it, and you can have a lot of potential spillover, to where you can do techniques, you can engage in a way that makes noise outside the scope. So it is very easy to go outside the scope and cause disruptions. Versus in a theoretical, it's hard to go, um, it'd be very difficult to do something in Hack the Box that then causes disruptions outside of the Hack the Box theoretical environment. I know we're I know we're giving credit to Hack the Box there. We love you guys. But it's a very good example of a top tier theoretical environment.
Yep. For me, the biggest downside of like non-theoretical training is what if you don't learn anything? Like, it'd be really easy to like say jump into a trace lab CTF and just get like frustrated and leave. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like so now you've learned like, you kind of like went in too fast, or you jumped into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, with maybe not enough preparation. So I feel like non-theoretical training does require you to have like some kind of a foundation, um and like just some kind of maybe a pre-existing skill set, or you could just like hit a brick wall, give up, and not gotten as much out of it as you would have otherwise. So there can be that kind of a steeper learning curve as opposed to training that's more guided.
Yeah, and it's a great way to test out your tools and technique. But you're right, you're not going to have the guidance items that make sure you learn. Like if you come into a trace labs event and you didn't find a particular piece of information, there's not going to be a guide for, hey, here's how to find that thing that you missed. We don't necessarily do that. And I think a lot of other non-theoreticals wouldn't necessarily say, hey, here's how you would have found that piece of information that we knew was there.
Yeah, so like we are looking at real world missing persons cases, and like any good investigation, we have intelligence requirements.
Right.
If anybody's not familiar with the Intel lifecycle, intelligence requirements are the questions you are trying to answer with this exercise. So, in the context of a trace lab CTF, our IRs are going to be our list of flags. These are pieces of information you may or may not find online about a person that could assist law enforcement in furthering their investigation. So, we're not just like turning our contestants loose on the internet and saying, go find what you can. We're giving them a very specific list of data points to go find. And that can lead to a really productive like experience, both, training and also like just for the efficiency of the investigation. Um, Alex, what are some things like you've learned doing trace lab CTFs, like just as an OSINT practitioner?
I think that's it, it's in practitioner. It's like some of the things that I've learned is that it is really important to have that cycle, as you said, of revisiting that question and going, okay, what is it I'm trying to answer? What is the stakeholder looking for? And then when you find something, process it and submit it as feedback, just folding that back in. So a lot of our flags and the intelligence pieces have evolved over time based on things that we found, the feedback that we've gotten, the law enforcement contacts telling us a number of important pieces of information, what they find valuable, what they don't find as valuable, and we're able to just kind of have that as an iterative process. And then, yeah, you always have different tools and techniques that you can leverage and lean on. Tools break, so then I think in a non-theoretical, you have that benefit of, okay, this isn't working. You need to lean on your techniques and say, okay, what do I need to do? Or you find a piece of information, or maybe you find that pivot point that you don't really have any particular tools. So, hey, you now have the benefit of kind of coming up with the um, idea on the fly of, okay, what do I do with this information and where do I go with this information? So sometimes you have that benefit of treading new ground. Um, you stumbled upon something that very few have dug into.
Yeah, for me, the biggest benefit has been in a setup, like say OSINT CTF, you're typically only answering a single question at a time. Like so you only have one IR. And the nature of that question is going to dictate, where you look, how you look, things like that. And that's a great learning experience. But with a non-theoretical exercise like this, you really have to take the time, digest the information you already have, and then decide, okay, I'm going to try to go here and then like confirm,
Yeah,
and then pivot. Because in these exercises, there is no like either platform, there is like no final, yes, that answer was correct.
yeah.
Like
And
you,
I just thought of like just a comparison would be in gaming terms you have that on rail side scrolling adventure to where it's like you have that progression of levels, or if you're a fan of beat 'em up games, you just keep moving to the right until you encounter the boss, versus non-theoretical, just kind of that open world scenario to where it's kind of, okay, you can go whatever direction you want to. You can completely get lost down rabbit holes and side quests, which for OSINT, yeah, there are a lot of interesting, side quests and rabbit holes that you can go down. You don't have a scripted path, versus a theoretical is the, okay, answer question one, then question two builds on that, question three builds on that. And maybe you can skip around a little bit, but it has that set path. Versus here, you have a number of paths. You just have to, choose your own structure. So that's one of the big things to learn is kind of structuring and refining it down to, okay, I have this open world environment, but I have this thing that I need to do and find and move towards that.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic way of describing it. Um, and before I lose the thought, um, the the challenge and the danger of like most non-theoretical training is there's not necessarily like a way to validate that you're right. So if you're on CTFD and you're putting in an answer, it'll tell you yes, this is correct or not. Or if you're on Hack the Box, you're submitting the flag you found.
Yeah,
You're
it's
either
inside
right
those
or you're
curly brackets, so
yes,
it's right because it's like when you see it, it's like, aha, there's something that's inside curly brackets. It's clear the day you found the thing versus yes, in ours you go, okay, is this really their third alternate social media profile? And
yep,
you go, it might not be. Like you're not going to submit it to us and we go, you're right, that is their third, alternate social media profile because we don't know. And I think that's one of the big things with a non-theoretical is that we don't know what the answers are. Um, having it crowdsourced, we can benefit from narrowing down if something is likely the correct because other people are finding it, other people are zeroing on that same piece of information, piece of intelligence, but we don't know definitively that that's the right answer.
yeah, and like that's exactly what real life investigations look like. It's you, the investigator, finding pieces of information to satisfy your intelligence requirements. And at the end of the day, your stakeholder, your client, your whomever is going to take your word for it based off of your research, the report you submitted. And if you're wrong, there are very, very real consequences. Um,
Yeah,
so, that being said, guardrails and guidelines and safety nets. So, like everything that we've just described sounds terrifying that that there's
oh yeah,
that there's this kind of training just happening all willy-nilly all over the internet. But in order for non-theoretical training to be truly effective, it does have to be safe. There's the expression, the best way to learn is by doing. In my opinion, the best way to learn is by doing something safely or by learning how to do it safely.
yeah,
Um, so how do we work that into our non-theoretical exercises?
yeah, just people, lots and lots of people, and I'd say that as like the oversight where we have coaches that are vetting the intelligence that comes in, and they can also you know make sure that you're not going off the rails or going heading down the wrong direction. So we have that oversight. We have the oversight of our admin team, and then you also just have a lot of the collective community that will say, no, you don't want to do that because that's going to be non-productive or it's going to be in some of the areas that are active techniques, and we absolutely restrict active techniques from being used to where you can't contact people, you can't contact law enforcement, reach out and or connect with friends and family, join private groups, do password resets or anything that would send a notification to either the subject of the investigation, the missing person, or the missing person's family, or really just anybody that we're looking into. We want to do a leave no trace. And that also mirrors again with the we're handing this over to law enforcement, which is another important guardrail, is that all that information is just going to law enforcement, but then they would take things that final step. So that also helps our contestants when we go, okay, you need to stop at this point and not progress further. We can leave that to law enforcement. You're giving it to people that can take those additional steps with legal requests.
Yeah, so we've taken a very, very realistic training exercise, but built in some very, very clear guidelines and guardrails. We've said, hey, here are the things you can't do. We talk all of our contestants through, here's how you conduct OSINT ethically and safely. Here are the things not to do. Here are the things you should do. And then Alex, as you mentioned, we have an entire community of people reinforcing those norms of the community. So just reinforcing how to do OSINT properly. And
Yeah.
I think like that's probably the piece you have to have in place to do effective non-theoretical training, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we have everything, confidential, so it's not a matter that we have this public forum that, starts, listing names or listing any avenue that we're looking for. So that's all kept in closed platform, which is important. And then also just we're non-speculative, that just we discourage and we really clamp down because again we're doing like intelligence there, so actual factual information that's enriched by context and relevance, that we push to, so that's another important guardrail so that things don't get very speculative. You start chasing down unethical rabbit holes. So keeping things very factual allows us to also really put in that additional layer of ethics.
Got it. So if someone was coming into the OSINT field brand new, what would they learn by competing in a TraceLab CTF?
Yeah, gosh, I think some of the things that they would learn is, probably like first and foremost, like how much information they themselves likely have out there. Uh, yeah, I think that's always the interesting things is when people are using these tools and techniques in order to find a missing person, or they run emails through a tool, or they learn how to enumerate through usernames and just see all the different places usernames are. They scratch their heads and they go, "Wow, I can probably do this on myself and find way too much information on myself." So they learn their own, personal privacy and security. But I think they also, yeah, they come away learning just a lot of developing that thought process and just kind of how to enhance not just the CTF practice, but then a lot of other practices where they can apply OSINT and go, hey, here's how I can do things much more deliberately, much more enriched with intelligence, much more, um, mindful of, who are the stakeholders? What are they looking for? Which really helps out in work life is that if you're able to distinctly and deliberately answer the questions set out by the people that you're working for and that sign your paycheck, that's going to come in very handy if you're able to just keep it very in scope, and answering the questions distinctly for them and enriching that with OSINT.
Yeah, and for me, I would say people coming in to do a TraceLab CTF, especially if you're newer to the field of OSINT, you're really going to learn how to ask questions. You're going to learn how to think about a situation critically. And I can say from personal experience, when I first got into OSINT, I bought a Mike Basil book and I was just tool. And I fell flat on my face the first time I tried to actually apply it in a non theoretical scenario because I didn't have any understanding of actual like fundamental investigative techniques. And that's what Trace Labs taught me was how
Yeah.
to approach this nebulous situation and start asking important questions, taking notes, pivoting, coming back, pivoting again. So for me, like I think that's probably the most important skill that a person will pick up by doing non-theoretical OSINT training. And I think the most important thing they'll probably learn is how to do it safely, how to do it, ethically,
Yeah.
how to do it correctly and not, get themselves into trouble. Well, Alex, I think the experts will agree that no one, could have possibly packed more OSINT into 35 minutes than we just did. So, job well done. Go us. Any parting words for the audience that gave us their time today?
No, and again, like you've given us time and attention, and we deeply appreciate that. And it's something that we deeply appreciate from all these volunteers that help out in this. So if you do decide to just listen to our talk and that's it, we appreciate that. If you stumble into our Discord server or take a look at our site or even decide to participate in one of our events, it's like we will again deeply appreciate that time that you're giving to us, to our community, and ultimately to the missing persons and the missing persons' families that are impacted by this growing problem.
Absolutely. I hope you made it this far in the talk, and if you have, I hope you're excited about non-theoretical OSINT training. I hope you join us in our community. It's fun, it's scary, you'll learn a lot, and I would love to do all those things together. So I hope to see you all around someday.